Do you want to? All right, there we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Stephanie Schweda. I'm an outreach specialist with the Stay Well program. My full-time job is as a school social worker at Da Vinci. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to be here with me today. We're going to talk about burnout and just talk about some different strategies to help cope if you are experiencing burnout. Sorry. Okay. So I wanted to share a little bit about what the Stay Well program is. We are a crisis counseling program administered by behavioral health professionals at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. We're in partnership with Michigan Public Health Institute and Griffin Place. So we were previously funded through FEMA as disaster relief. And then our state took on the funding, and right now we are funded to September of 2022, but it looks like the state's going to continue on that funding, as we know that the mental health needs due to COVID have been long lasting. So the Stay Well program has two main components. The first is our crisis counseling hotline, which is staffed by counselors who have undergone training in disaster relief. The counseling is free, confidential, and available 24/7. And you're going to see the phone number there on the screen. At the end, Andrea is going to send out the resource guide that's going to have all this information in there as well. The second component is our behavioral health outreach, and this has three goals. The first is to validate, normalize, and humanize the response to the pandemic. The second is to direct people in need of the Stay Well counseling line. And then the third is to provide resources to help individuals cope. So we offer a variety of webinars like this one. We have live and recorded. We have free online support groups and then free printed material. Within the program, outreach specialists like me serve a variety of vulnerable populations, which you're going to see they're listed there on the screen. My focus is on K-12 educators. So that is who I work primarily with. So as employees, parents, siblings, children, we are all expected to be flexible and deal with the needs as they arise, whatever they may be. But COVID-19 is a completely different ballgame. During this pandemic, individuals have faced and are facing traumatic experiences in both their professional and personal worlds. They face challenges at work, dealing with the roll-on effects of a pandemic. Meanwhile, we must contend with coronavirus-related challenges in our own lives, such as children home from school, a lack of daycare, partners out of work, or other pressures. The workforce is trained to keep their professional lives and personal lives separate, right? We want to leave it at the door. But the boundaries between these two spheres are now blurred. They are sharing the same collective trauma as the communities they serve, right? This must be acknowledged. And that's what we're going to go through as we move through this presentation, is really identifying what these different symptoms are and what we can do to help either prevent if you're not experiencing burnout or alleviate if you are experiencing burnout. So throughout all of this, right, all of these blurred lines, you might be asking yourself, why am I having such a hard time focusing? It seems right, these are very uncertain times, and so it's hard to concentrate for any length of time. It feels hard to concentrate for any length of time as we're in the collective state of near constant distraction. So this really comes from the phenomenon or psychological theory of cognitive load theory, CLT. And this originally applied in the context of learning, and it might just help explain why it's been so hard to focus lately. So put simply, CLT characterizes our minds as information processing systems, like a computer. When we're working on a problem, especially one we are unfamiliar with, we depend on our working memory, which is very limited both in its capacity and the length of time it holds information. New tasks and new stress levels can affect this capacity. By forcing you into new routines, these new stressors have robbed you of the ability to do things on auto. These adaptations force you out of autopilot and draw on your limited working memory capacity. Emotions can also interfere with information processing. When you're anxious, for example, this is known to reduce working memory capacity, which makes it more difficult to work through any challenging situations, regardless of how large or small the situation may be. What's happening now is that disruptions to life caused by the pandemic are forcing you to draw on your limited working memory capacity more often at a time when, if you're more stressed and your anxiety levels are raised, you have diminishing working memory capacity. It's the worst of both worlds and another reason why you might be feeling mentally drained. Ordinarily, in a time of upheaval, we would adjust quickly and the cognitive load becomes more manageable again. What's striking about life in the era of COVID-19 is that the situation keeps changing. Barely a day goes by without a new development for us to register and respond to. Uncertainty always increases cognitive load. Stressors such as health threat, fear or unemployment, and fear of reintegration can cause cognitive load. Sorry, I'm trying to let people come in as well. Here we go. Okay. What can we do with all of this? It helps to know what some of the common work-related factors that add to stress are. So this can include taking care of personal and family needs while working, managing a different workload, lack of access to the tools and equipment needed to perform your job, uncertainty about the future of your workplace and or employment, and then working irregular or longer hours. So you don't have to, put this in the chat or anything, but I just want you to take a look at these 7 different points and think of if you can identify with even one of them. I know personally I could identify with all 7. And I have a feeling many of us could. We definitely have some work-related stress. So talking about burnout, in all fields and all types of jobs, employees can suffer burnout. This is nothing new. So burnout is the state of complete and utter exhaustion due to the work that is being undertaken. At some point in time, I'm sure that we have all experienced this before. Burnout is so common right now, and it can affect us both mentally and physically. So some of the different, as you can see what's on the slide here, some different signs and symptoms of burnout. So take a few minutes, kind of look at this list and see if there's anything that sticks out to you. So I definitely, fatigue, frustration, negativity. So really looking at these, symptoms and how they manifest both physiologically and physically, and how that can lead to disruptions in the workplace. So now I have a poll we're going to do, sorry. So I want you just to kind of answer this in, within the last 2 weeks, have you noticed any signs of symptoms of burnout in other people or in yourself? So we have about 15 people on here, and so far 90% who have answered are saying yes. So they've noticed it in other people, and then we have 75% are saying that they've noticed it within themselves. So pretty high numbers, right? So I think it's all fair that we are in the right place right now to learn about what we can do with burnout. Taking a minute to just read through this quote. As you've worked through the pandemic, you may have noticed that you or someone you know has experienced feelings of hopelessness or a belief that change is impossible. There may be even socially withdrawing from their coworkers, friends, families, or even society at large. There can be some episodes of unwarranted or disproportionate anger. These are all signs of secondary traumatic stress, which can lead to compassion fatigue. And we are going to talk about that further. Andrea, are you able to admit people?
No, but I'm talking to Courtney right now, and if you give me the host back, I can give you permission to still screen share, then I can let people in the whole time.
Okay. So I need to probably, give me just a second, guys.
So sorry about this.
That's okay. All right, I've made you the host.
Okay, and then I allowed you to share. So
Perfect.
should be good.
All right, we back on? Okay, perfect. So this quote really, the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. So that leads us in, what is compassion fatigue? So we have heard and possibly lived through devastating stories related to this disaster. This can lead to secondary traumatic stress, which is often an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the emotional pain and or physical distress of those being helped. When this secondary traumatic stress converges and accumulates with burnout, this again is a state of physical and mental exhaustion caused by a depleted ability to cope with one's everyday environment, which really goes into that compassion fatigue. So the term compassion fatigue was really coined to describe the phenomenon of stress resulting from exposure to a traumatized individual rather than to the exposure itself, right? So we have burnout plus secondary traumatic, secondary trauma, which can lead to compassion fatigue. So again, looking at some of these different signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue and how they differentiate a little bit from burnout, right? So we're maybe having some nightmares. I want to highlight addiction because right now our addiction rates are really high, and they are also high among professionals as well. So definitely using some unhealthy coping skills to manage, which is very common. So reduced empathy, kind of feeling like I don't want to go to work. I'm not going to have a good time at work. Looking at those symptoms, right? So definitely hard to concentrate. And then I think it's really important to identify like what triggers compassion fatigue. So we know secondary traumatic stress, we know burnout, but I think it's important to know that previous exposure to trauma is also can be a trigger. Our work environment, what type of setting are you working in? And then prolonged exposure to trauma. And I think the important piece to this is COVID is an indefinite timeline, right? So it's not like it just happened and we're done. We continuously are being re-traumatized or re-triggered. And I think that's that prolonged exposure, right? So the impact that it's going to have can be continuous. So looking at what are the professional and interpersonal effects of secondary traumatic stress. So we're going, back a little bit, but really looking at how does it impact us personally and professionally, right? So professionally, we're not being as productive as we can, lots of exhaustion, communication breaks down, conflict between staff, inability to stop working. Some people feel like kind of the work is never done, so they're not allowing themselves to break at all. Maybe second guessing, detachment, and then interpersonal. So there's going to be some isolation, withdrawal, loneliness, maybe anger directed at loved ones. Definitely guilty of that, right? You have a bad day at work, you go home, and we take it out on the people who are safest to us. And then the negative impact on parenting. So again, all affects, it doesn't just affect us at work, it's affecting us personally and interpersonally. So we've talked about burnout, we talked about secondary traumatic stress. This is a relatively new term, and I don't, some of you may have heard of this or not, but this is called compassion fatigue. I'm sorry, COVID traumatic stress, which comes from Taryn Hughes, who's a compassion fatigue therapist. And she really coined this from the framework of secondary traumatic stress. So, excuse me, I got a little tickle in my throat there. So while many have experienced direct loss or illness to COVID-19, millions of others are living in a constantly triggered state due to the rapid changes in society. So we've got the loss of human interaction with, different various settings. So lots of change, lots of regulation changes, increased risk of exposure. I work in a school, so the risk is definitely high with students being just sick in general, right? They say your first year in a school, you're always sick, and I have felt that. I have been nonstop sick this year from just like the normal germs that get passed around. So when we're in this state, right, we're constantly in this like fight or flight state when we don't know what to expect. So we're always kind of bracing ourselves for the next danger. So while our next hurdle is really we're continuously adjusting to all of the changes, right? We go back to, and then not to mention we have a lot that's happening like in our world, right? That isn't related to COVID, but that also can be really traumatic. So we're not only having to deal with the effects of COVID, but just the effects of, normal trauma or just what, the stress that's happening in our lives. So it's really important that we acknowledge that people's brains and bodies are struggling to adjust to an ever constant change and make sense of what sometimes feels like a completely new daily reality. So this is, definitely unprecedented situation for virtually everyone on the planet. Nobody knows how to manage. Well, we're all learning how to manage through a pandemic together. So again, when we send out the resource packet, there's going to be a lot of this information in there, but just really looking at what are some of the symptoms of COVID traumatic stress. So some of this is going to be really similar to what we've talked about with compassion fatigue and burnout. But again, just kind of looking through this and see if there's any that stick to you, right, that you might be having. I definitely, depending on how the day is, can identify with maybe more of these. Especially when you have to do, depending on what your work is, if you have to do a lot regarding COVID. My previous employment, I was in supervision. And so kind of COVID was always circulating around my head. Here in the school, I don't have to do as much with making decisions around COVID, which is makes it a little less stressful, but there's still lots of conversations about it. So just kind of looking through this, and a couple of these are highlighted of just some of our more common ones that people in previous webinars have identified as kind of their biggest barriers right now, or their biggest symptoms. I want us to remember that symptoms are a response and they are not a weakness. In a time like this, when we know people are struggling, it is imperative that we help one another cope. Remember that symptoms are temporary and are happening in response to a global pandemic. Symptoms do not mean that something is wrong with the person. It is the body's natural response to prolonged stress and anxiety. So kind of thinking about this, our current environment in a different way. So the symptoms we see are like a flashing battery light that is signaling it needs to be plugged into a grounded outlet to replenish its energy. That grounded outlet can be a trusted friend, a therapist, a coach, health practitioner, or the Stay Well program, which we talked about earlier. So that connectivity is really important. So it is important to have compassion for our traumatic stress response. Being gentle and understanding of our bodies and brains can help cultivate self-compassion and tenderness toward others. Our brain is doing its best to make sense of a completely new environment. During that scanning for danger process that occurs in our brain, mistakes or generalizations are often made. We can mistakenly categorize, benign circumstances, groups of people, or behaviors as dangerous when actually they are not. Understanding that trauma isolates and blocks connections to others can help us take the brave step toward helping another person. This single action of interpersonal connection helps release the fear and simultaneously calming our own nervous system. So, going back and understanding a little bit about what does COVID traumatic stress do to the office, right? We should understand that it's not just individuals who are being impacted by COVID traumatic stress. Small, medium, and large businesses, as well as nonprofits and government agencies, are being impacted at the same rate. When large groups of staff are impacted by COVID traumatic stress or COVID fatigue, communications break down, inter-office tensions can increase, and distrust in leadership may arise. Additionally, COVID traumatic stress can slow down the day-to-day operations because of employee error, decreased productivity, challenges to organizing and prioritizing, as well as health-related symptoms. So specifically, in the school, we have a teacher shortage. We all know that, but we also just have a staff shortage. As a school social worker, sometimes I get pulled into being a parapro or helping with lunch duty, which is great, but then I'm not able to get some of the other duties that I have to get done. So, or just even being out sick yourself, right? Every sniffle and sneeze, you have to take a COVID test, or you have to, nurse yourself back in. So that can be really frustrating to get your work done if you're constantly sick. Like I said, first year in the school, I'm always sick. So Executives, managers, and supervisors are also living through many of the symptoms, simultaneously being held to a higher standard of action by themselves and others. Many leaders and staff may be disillusioned and become increasingly pessimistic and defeated or overwhelmed. It's been reported that they feel as if no one is hearing them and nobody cares about their health, well-being, or personal circumstances. This can lead to frustration, pointing fingers, an increased need for control, maybe some resistance, avoidance of responsibilities, and refusal to respond to what is being requested both in the workplace and at home. Breaking the silence will help everyone realize that they are not alone in this experience. There is great comfort in sharing and connecting with calm, supportive people who can soothe your nervous system. People don't really like to talk about their mental health at work. So you can see here by the statistics that 1/3 of employees are fearful of disclosing that they are experiencing challenges with their mental health. So Stay Well has been shared with employees as an alternative to an EAP program, offering the employee the confidentiality to seek support services without fear of potential retaliation. So that goes back to some of those support groups and discussion groups that we have, being able to utilize that as a way to seek some support. So as a society, we have such a stigma surrounding mental health. There is such an opportunity here to help change these perceptions and we do that in a free and supportive way. So again, the hotline or those discussion groups are just a great referral, or even for yourself. So looking a little bit, if we have some supervisors who are on, people in a leadership role, I want to just go through this slide because I think that it's really important. But what can leadership staff or supervisors or managers do to help prevent burnout? So one of the biggest things is that they can model self-care. Practicing what we preach is not always the easiest, but leaders who model good crisis behavior give permission to their personnel to do the same. This can be challenging, particularly in people that have a tendency to care for others, often at their own expense. Taking steps to demonstrate desired behaviors to subordinates, encouraging supervisors at all levels to do the same. We can also, a supervisor or a leader in leadership can also practice effective communication. Knowing and practicing effective strategies for communication before, during, and following a predicament reduces the frequency and dissemination of rumors, enhances trust and collaboration with personnel, and enhances compliance of personnel with recommended occupational and other health behaviors. Leaders should look at signs and symptoms of burnout and compassion fatigue and identify ways that your organization can help to support the person. And then a big thing is grief, right? So grief is one of the most universal emotions that we are experiencing. Grief of loss of loved ones, relationships. So any way to be able to offer some support around grief is really important. And then reintegration, we know that everybody's at different levels as far as reintegrating back into work. There's some combination between being in person, virtual, learning, or virtual settings. So any way that you can help with that transition or allowing a split schedule is really great too. So when you experience or witness burnout and or compassion fatigue, what you see and perhaps experience may be extended periods of time and reduced levels of motivation and interest in the job. We can maybe see some decrease in teamwork, productivity, and fulfillment, and this can lead to decreased job productivity. This begins a domino effect of additional stressors and triggers for burnout and compassion fatigue. This can be a result of too much effort in the workplace with limited opportunities for recovery. It can be extremely draining if you as a member of your team's leadership is feeling this way, but yet still trying to motivate your team, still trying to keep productivity up. I wanted to remind you that your pain, discomfort, and worries are valid. It's important that we continue to process and grow through our own life challenges, as often there is a tendency to ignore our own problems because they don't feel as severe as those we serve. And that's what we're going to really get into as we move through the rest of this presentation, but really looking at our health, right? So health is not just defined as the physical well-being, but it includes, physical, emotional, career, intellectual, environmental, spiritual, and social. So each of these dimensions are a part of your quality of life. And if one is neglected for a long period of time, you're going to see a negative overall effect on your health. So the things we're going to talk about, so what are some personal interventions to alleviate burnout? This is really important because once we've started to experience burnout, what can we do to react to those symptoms? But we really want to go from how are we thriving to just merely surviving. So the first one is setting boundaries. It is important to work reasonable hours and commit to disengaging from work based on the commitment you make with yourself. This will be different for everyone, but the rule is crucial. So, I think back to it. I know it's not realistic to say, well, when you leave work or when you're done with working, you shut your computer off and you don't do it. Some of our jobs require more than 40 hours worth of work. So maybe you set yourself, I know for me, I have to set a timer. I have 30 minutes to go through my email or to complete this, and then I'm done. I've got to put it away. And then I'm trying to be really mindful with my family. So just whatever those boundaries are, they've got to be realistic, but being able to have those boundaries is important. You need to acknowledge your limitations. You must embrace the fact that you cannot help everyone all at the same time. You must accept that there is only so much you can do, and that is enough. This acceptance will allow you to be present in both work and outside of work. Creating space for yourself, taking time to relax and recharge, unplugged as often as possible. Really learning to ask yourself, what do I need right now? Sometimes it could be solitude, other times it might be that social support. We know that eating, sleeping, hydrating, and moving is extremely important. We hear it all the time, but however, whatever ways we can stay active regularly, trying to figure out how many steps can you get, making sure you're fueling your body with good nutrition, regardless, we want to make sure we're getting enough sleep. That's really important for our body to, nourish itself, revitalize, making sure you're allotting enough time to go to sleep, staying off social media or off your phone, so that you can fall asleep. Doing those things are going to help disengage your brain a little bit before bed. We want to find some non-work outlets. We want to be able, engagement with hobbies, friends, loved ones, creative endeavors, and your interpretation of spirituality. So finding those outlets outside of work. Utilizing your network is really important. Turn to your coworkers to help throughout your shift. Connect with those that are like-minded as you and will offer you support. We want to kind of stick away from the people that are going to add stress, right, when you're already feeling overwhelmed. Implementation of mindfulness. Our next slide is going to go into some more detail about mindfulness and some different strategies, but there's a ton of really great apps out there. Right now I'm using the Calm app, and they're offering 40% off for educators. So I think that can be pretty loosely defined. But that's a really cool. Headspace is another one. Plus, they have a ton of really great resources on YouTube. There's a ton of stuff that you can use right now. And then we also have, we have our Stay Well lines, which I've talked about, but also just like considering speaking to someone too, if it's professional or if it's just, again, like a group of people that, make you feel good. And that's important too. Having those outlets and those people that we can talk to when we are struggling. So some tips in mindfulness, self-care, it's not something we just want to do in our spare time or on vacation. It really has to be kind of a disposition or attitude, an ongoing state of body and mind. It is the way of grounding yourself. We encourage you to take time each day to shift from a mode of doing and action to one of pausing and being with whatever is happening right now. As you sit, stand, move, right now you can even notice some feelings, thoughts, body sensations that come and go. I know you guys have been in quite a few trainings throughout the day. So maybe feeling a little tired, a little laggy after lunch, so just really paying attention to what's going on in your body. One of my favorite things is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can feel, smell, taste, it just, all the 5 senses. My brain's not working on full cylinders right now. It's the middle of the school day and we had a little bit of a crisis right before I came in. So I apologize for not being fully here. I'm trying to be mindful and present. So it's just really important that we're trying to tune in, right? Tune into what's going on with our bodies. And this is going to really give us more clarity and wisdom. taking time to be with yourself in this way on a regular basis is the heart of what is known as mindful meditation. So, that can also be done with breath work. So, being able, there's tons of really great exercises, but the breathing is so important, making sure you've got those breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, those good breaths that are going to fill up the lungs. I love to teach like some of my younger kids who tend to run their mouths a little bit, get themselves into trouble, right? Try taking that deep breath, because it's really hard to spew stuff out of your mouth when you're taking deep breaths. So I have them practice that with me, but breathing is so important. I have a 4-year-old, and so I have to consistently do that. Take a deep breath before I respond, because I got to collect myself so I don't react to some of the things that she says or does. Body awareness, right? So there's some really great stuff, muscle relaxation. I always like to use the example with this one of I generally, like, my brain hasn't figured out it's stressed out yet, but I start to feel tightness in my jaw, and it's because I've been clenching my teeth, right? So really paying attention to what your body's telling you, because sometimes it tells us what's going on before we've kind of caught up. So any type of, muscle relaxation stuff, so clenching up some muscles, releasing them, is all really great things to do. And again, these are all things you can do within your day. It's a matter of taking those 5 minutes to do that. I also really I try to get outside as much as I can and use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as I'm walking, right? Paying attention to my foot hitting the ground, or, the birds chirping in, whatever that may be. And depending on what your day looks like, being able to set that into your day, right? Taking the lunch when you need to, going for a walk when you need to. Those are all really important things. We also want to be aware of our thoughts. Again, like right now, it's been a long day. Your thoughts might be drifting. You might be on your email, catching up on emails, right? Kind of think about what's for dinner tonight, got to go to sports practices tonight. So really trying to focus on, where are your thoughts right now? Are they on the here and now? Are they present? And really trying to bring yourself back to the present if you have found yourself kind of shifting forward or backwards with your thoughts. Other thing that's really important is single focus tasking. Multitasking kind of is the norm in our world, but we're not actually capable of multitasking. So we end up rapidly switching tasks, forgetting things, and not giving our best to the task we are trying to accomplish. There's something just really therapeutic to doing a task, finishing it, and it's done. So really trying to do one task at a time, complete it, and then move on to the next thing. We've talked about this throughout here. Social support is so important. The relationships you have with family, friends, and colleagues are a vital source of nutrients to comfort. On a practical level, they provide concrete assistance, valuable information, and companionship. On an emotional level, they foster a sense of belonging. So again, any way that we can help pull on those social supports are really important. Finding out who those social supports are. There's that person at work, your go-to, that you can go and you can spend some time with, that's going to make you feel a little bit better. So again, so this one, number 9, mindfulness at work, taking your lunch breaks, right? It's really important that you give yourself that. And I know that that's really hard, because in some of our settings, we don't always get those lunch breaks. Like I said, for me today, this is my lunch break, being here with you guys. So, while that's all really nice, it's not always a break, right? It's not always getting to eat your lunch and actually sitting down, letting it digest. So anytime that you guys can just sit down and take that break, take that lunch, it's so important. When you do take a break, right, really just being able to figure out all these things we talked about. Where's your breathing at? Where's your thoughts at? Where's your body at? Using those 5 senses to bring yourself back. The other thing that I think is really important with the blurred of work and home is, how do you know when your work day is ended, right? So if you are working from home, what routines and structures do you have that okay, work's done? During the stay-at-home order, we worked from home, and I literally was doing therapy in my bedroom, closed my laptop, and had to go out and be a mom and a wife and a dog owner and all that. So if you are, and even if not, right, we have stressful days at work, but how do you know what signifies your day's over? For me right now, I go home and I get in my comfy clothes. That's how I know, the work clothes are put away and I'm in my comfy clothes. It's now, I don't get to work anymore. My brain is off and I'm here at home and present with my family. So just thinking about what some of those rituals are and how do you know that you're done with work. What are some physical things that you can do, some cognitive things you can do to really end that day for you. So this is a really cool, I'm gonna have, when I stop sharing at some point, I will link this in to you guys. This is a really cool self-care plan that I found, and I actually use it. It's something that's constantly talked about, but it's definitely the hardest for us to implement. We know in many of our professions, we tend to fill the cups of those around us and forget to nourish and take care of ourselves. So you can see from all the information that we have presented, it is so important. Like most of you, I think we said, out of I think we had 12, almost everyone shared that they're seeing burnout in other people. And I think 75% said they're seeing it in themselves. So I want you to really take a moment and, think about, and you can add this into the chat, but what are some of the things that you like to do for self-care? And it can be those spontaneous things, or it can be those everyday situations. So if you just want to throw it in the chat of what do you do for self-care? So someone said walking in the nature. Yeah, there is something about going out to the woods. It clears the soul. I love that. A fresh air walk. Yeah, let's hope that our weather is getting a little nicer. I got to go for a 45-minute walk yesterday. And someone recently turned me on to audiobooks. I've never been an audiobook person. I've always needed to read because I don't have the concentration for audiobook. But I've been listening to this audiobook, When Crickets Cry. It's great. It's a good tearjerker though. So I don't know how great that is, me crying in the, as I'm walking, but it's just a good book. So, audiobook, right? I'm listening to that as I'm taking this walk. Listening to music, relaxing hobbies, dinner out. Yeah, there is something really nice about going out, right? Getting out of our house. Meditate, reading. Someone said fishing. I love it. Hike in the woods, yoga, meditation, TED Talks, being outside, a lot of reading, socializing with friends, working out. Absolutely. Yeah, someone put our animals, right? Our animals can be so good for us. Yes. Spending time with grandkids. Dance like no one's watching. I actually have a sign in my kitchen that says that because that's my daughter and I's thing right now is she puts on some good music. And for her, it's like Frozen, Let It Go. Her recent obsession is Who Let the Dogs Out. I have no idea where she picks up these things. So she's been blaring that. We have an Alexa. So she blares that everywhere. Who Let the Dogs Out. And she likes to, sing and dance in the kitchen. Comedy shows. Yes. Crochet, church. Yeah. That spirituality piece is really fun. Calling a friend. And you put something in here, sitting still and no sound. I think there is something so powerful to that, right? There's this few moments on Tuesdays and Thursdays when my husband takes my daughter to school, and I have about 15 minutes where it's just quiet. And it's such a weird feeling, right? It's such a weird experience, but it's sometimes so nice. So it sounds like you guys have some great strategies, right? Some great things that you define as self-care. So what I would encourage is, like I said, when I stop sharing, I'll put this link in here, but this self-care action plan. So it's important looking at what you've learned about the symptoms and signs of burnout. What are your signs of burnout, right? What are your stress relievers? Who are those people you can reach out to support? And just some reminders, right? What are some things that are going to help remind you? And I actually have this printed off and I have it on my desk. I have two offices because I'm in two different buildings, but I have them pinned up to each of my offices. And then I also have a picture of it on my phone. And I really try to make an effort, right? Really try to make an effort to look at this every single day, and also making sure that I'm doing those things. Like I want my stress relievers to be things that I can do daily, that I can do weekly, that maybe sometimes it's hourly. So you can see too, a big one too is saying no. That's one of the hardest things, saying no, staying at home. Sometimes we overcommit ourselves to things and then we're feeling overwhelmed and stressed. So sometimes just being at home. Sometimes it's cleaning out that junk drawer, right? For me, I usually have to go and clean something out, and that for whatever reason is just, it feels really good. It feels like I accomplished something. So a lot of different things. Like I said, I'll put that in there. And I just really would encourage you to take a minute and fill it out for yourself as a reminder, put it somewhere. Someone in a presentation I was in with last week, they said they had their staff all do it and then asked them to put it on their fridge for a week, right? So just put it on your fridge. Someone else shared that she put at the end of her workday, she put a reminder in her phone that says mindfulness, that just reminded her to pay attention on her car ride home, right? Do the mindfulness activity on her car ride home. So a lot of just little things, but sometimes we need reminders. Sometimes we need little things to help push us into that. So any way you can do that is really great. Here were some of the Stay Well, we call them discussion groups. I think I called them support groups earlier, but there's Stay Well discussion groups. So one of our most popular groups right now is the grief group. So like I said, grief is our most universal emotion right now. And this one's is a very common one right now. We also have a bunch of really cool webinar series. Zainab, who's a licensed counselor, does a creative coping one, and then she does a grief and loss. So it's just, they meet weekly and talk about some different things. So again, we've got a lot of new resources coming up for teens too, which is really cool. So a lot of stuff on there, and looking at just doing the other really common group we have right now too is the Be Kind to Your Mind. So this is just whatever type of support you need. And there's something too to just being able to go in and hearing other people's experiences if you don't feel comfortable sharing your own. And then we do have the counseling line, which is that one-on-one. So I would really encourage, go to our website, michigan.gov/staywell, and you're going to find all sorts of resources there, which is really exciting. At the end of the day, you know, our slogan, Stay Well slogan, is Be Kind to Your Mind. And we really encourage that for everyone. We want to help, you know, if there are things that are specific that you need within your agency, within a school district you're working in, whatever it may be, you've got my contact information here. You'll also get it in a resource packet, but please feel free to reach out to me. And so we can see, you know, all of our services are free. So if there's a need that you have that we can help support, reach out and we will try our best to do that. We just did, a colleague and I just put together a really great trauma presentation. So we will create something based on the need that you have as well. So I want to thank you guys for being here. I think I'm going to leave it open a little bit for some questions, some comments, and then Andrea is going to put that resource packet in. But thank you guys so much. And thanks for being patient with me as I stumbled through some things. Like I said, my lunch was a little broken up with dealing with a kid here. So sorry about that. But
Thank you, Stephanie.
yes.
I cannot figure out how to attach a file in the chat.
Okay, let me see if I can do it.
Okay. And then I will get the link on there for your CEUs, guys. Give me 1 second. There's the link. And I am going to stop recording now unless there's any other questions.
I am not figuring out how to do this.
So what we can do is we can have Courtney or Rebecca email it out to everybody.
Okay, perfect. I'm so sorry about that. I don't know how usually there's just a upload document on here and it's not showing that as an option for me. So I don't know if it's something weird with the settings, but.
Yeah, I thought it was easy when you asked me and I was like,
Well,
I can't figure this out now.
Absolutely. No, Courtney was able to do it earlier, so she might have some special tricks. You know, after 2 years of having to use Zoom, I'm still like in the dark with technology. So
All right, guys.